What if everything you've been told about happiness, success, and being blessed is completely backwards? What if the very things you've been trying to avoid, pain, humility, brokenness, are actually the doorway to a life of deep peace and unshakable purpose? That sounds uncomfortable, right? But that's exactly what Jesus Christ taught in one of the most powerful messages ever delivered. A message that has challenged kings, transformed outcasts, and changed millions of lives for over 2,000 years. And here's the truth. Most people have heard of it. Few people actually understand it, and even fewer truly live it. Today, we're diving deep into what's known as the Sermon on the Mount, a teaching so radical, so countercultural that if you really take it seriously, it will change everything about how you see your life. Not just spiritually, but mentally, emotionally, and even practically. So don't just watch this. Lean in, because this might be the message your life has been missing. Picture this: a hillside. The air is still. A crowd is gathering. Ordinary people, fishermen, laborers, families, the overlooked, the tired, the searching. They're not the powerful. They're not the elite. They're people looking for hope. And standing before them is Jesus Christ. No stage, no microphone, no spotlight. Yet somehow, every word he speaks carries weight. This moment, recorded in the Gospel of Matthew chapters 5 through 7 in the Bible, would become one of the most studied and quoted teachings in human history. But here's what makes it so powerful. The people listening that day were expecting something very different. They were expecting a political revolution, a leader who would overthrow oppression, someone who would elevate them above their enemies. But instead, they got a message about the heart, a message about humility, a message about transformation from the inside out. And it begins with a series of statements that completely flip the definition of what it means to be blessed. Jesus begins with words that, at first glance, don't make sense. Blessed are. That word blessed doesn't just mean happy. It means deeply fulfilled, spiritually grounded, aligned with God in a way that produces lasting peace, not temporary pleasure. And then, he says something shocking. Beatitude number 1. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Wait, what? How can being poor in spirit be a good thing? In a world that celebrates confidence, self-sufficiency, and independence, this sounds like weakness. But that's not what it means. To be poor in spirit is to recognize your need for God. It's the moment you stop pretending you have everything together. It's when you realize you can't do life on your own. And instead of seeing that as failure, Jesus calls it the beginning of true life. Because as long as you think you're full, you'll never reach for what you actually need. But when you come empty, that's when God fills you. Let me ask you something. Have you ever reached a point where you realized that no matter how hard you tried, something was still missing? That feeling? That emptiness? That might not be something to run from. It might be an invitation. Beatitude number 2. Then Jesus continues, Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Again, this feels backwards. We spend so much of our lives trying to avoid pain, avoid grief, avoid anything that makes us uncomfortable. But Jesus doesn't say mourning is good because pain is good. He says it's blessed because of what it leads to. Because when you allow yourself to truly feel, to grieve, to acknowledge brokenness, you open the door to healing. Real comfort doesn't come from distraction. It comes from facing what's real. And here's something powerful. The world tells you to hide your pain, to mask it, to scroll past it, to pretend you're okay. But Jesus says, bring it into the light, because that's where healing begins. Beatitude number 3. And then he says, Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now this one is often misunderstood. Meekness is not weakness. It's not being passive. It's not letting people walk all over you. Meekness is strength, under control. It's having power, but choosing humility. It's the ability to respond with patience when you could react with anger, to stay grounded when everything in you wants to explode. And in a world driven by ego, pride, and the need to prove yourself, this kind of strength stands out. It's rare. And according to Jesus, it's powerful. So already, just 3 statements in, everything is shifting. The way we see strength, the way we see pain, the way we see success. It's all being redefined, and we're just getting started. Because what comes next goes even deeper. So let's pause for a second. Because if you're really listening, this isn't comfortable. Everything Jesus Christ is saying goes against what most of us have been taught our entire lives. We've been told, be strong, hide your weakness, chase success, protect your image. But here, Jesus is saying, be humble, be honest about your pain, let go of control, and now, he takes it even deeper. Beatitude number 4. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Think about that for a moment. Hunger, thirst. These are not casual desires. These are deep cravings, the kind you can't ignore, the kind that demand your attention. Jesus is not talking about a mild interest in doing the right thing. He's talking about a deep, relentless desire for what is right, for truth, for justice, for a life aligned with God. And here's the question. What are you hungry for right now? Success? Approval? Comfort? Because whatever you hunger for will shape your life. If you crave validation, you'll chase people. If you crave comfort, you'll avoid growth. But if you hunger for righteousness, Jesus says, you will be filled. Not temporarily, not halfway, fully. And that kind of fulfillment, the world can't offer it. Beatitude number 5. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. This one hits deep, because mercy is easy to want, but hard to give. It's easy to ask for forgiveness when you mess up. But when someone hurts you, betrays you, disrespects you, that's when mercy becomes a challenge. Everything in you might say, they don't deserve it. And you're right. Mercy is not about what people deserve. It's about choosing compassion anyway. It's about releasing the need to get even. And here's the powerful truth. When you hold on to anger, you don't trap the other person. You trap yourself. But when you release it, when you choose mercy, you step into freedom. So the question becomes, who do you need to forgive? Not because they earned it, but because you need peace. Beatitude number 6. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. This goes beyond actions. This goes deeper than behavior. This is about intention, the hidden part of you that no one else sees, your motives, your thoughts, your inner world. Because it's possible to look right on the outside and still be divided on the inside. But purity of heart means alignment. It means who you are in private matches, who you are in public. No masks, no pretending, just honesty. And Jesus says something incredible here. They shall see God, not just someday, but in how they live, in how they perceive, in how they experience life. Because when your heart is clear, your vision becomes clear too. Beatitude number 7. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Notice this carefully. Jesus doesn't say peacekeepers. He says peacemakers. There's a difference. Peacekeeping avoids conflict. Peacemaking steps into it with wisdom. Peacekeeping stays silent to keep things comfortable. Peacemaking speaks truth with love to bring healing. And in today's world, conflict is everywhere. Arguments, division, tension. But peacemakers, they stand out. They don't add fuel to the fire. They bring calm into chaos. They choose understanding over winning. And according to Jesus, that reflects the heart of God. Beatitude number 8. And then, the final one. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This might be the hardest one to accept, because no one wants to suffer. No one wants to be rejected. But Jesus is preparing his listeners for reality, living this way, living differently, standing for truth. It won't always be accepted. In fact, sometimes it will cost you. You might be misunderstood. You might be judged. You might even be rejected. But Jesus says, even then, you are blessed. Why? Because it means you're living for something greater than approval. You're living with purpose, with conviction, with truth. So now, take a step back and look at this. This is not just a list of good ideas. This is a completely different way of living. A life marked by humility, by mercy, by integrity, by courage. It's not easy. It's not comfortable, but it is powerful. And here's the shift. Jesus is not just describing what blessed people look like. He's inviting you to become one. But how do you live this out in the real world? How do you carry this mindset into your daily life? That's where he goes next. And this part changes everything about your identity and your purpose. At this point, you might be thinking, this sounds powerful, but also impossible. How do you actually live like this? How do you stay humble in a world full of pride? Show mercy when people hurt you. Stand for truth when it costs you something. That's exactly where Jesus Christ goes next. Because he doesn't just teach what to become. He tells you who you already are. If you choose to follow him, you are the salt of the earth. Not you should be. Not try to become. He says, you are. Now think about salt for a moment. In ancient times, salt was incredibly valuable. It preserved food. It prevented decay. It added flavor. Without it, things would spoil quickly. So what is Jesus saying? He's saying, your presence should make a difference. When you step into a situation, things should change. Not because you're loud, not because you're perfect, but because something in you carries truth, integrity, and life. But then he gives a warning. If the salt loses its saltiness, it's no longer good for anything. In other words, if you blend in completely, if there's no difference between you and the world around you, you lose your impact. Let that sink in. Because this challenges a lot of us. It's easy to stay quiet, to fit in, to avoid standing out. But Jesus is saying, you weren't created to blend in. You were created to influence. Then he continues, you are the light of the world. Again, not you might be, you are. Light does one thing. It reveals. It pushes back darkness. Even the smallest light can transform a room. Imagine walking into a completely dark space. You can't see anything. You're unsure, uncomfortable. But the moment a light turns on, everything changes. Clarity, direction, confidence. That's what your life is meant to bring into the world. And then Jesus says something powerful. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Light is not meant to be covered. It's meant to be seen. But here's the tension. A lot of people dim their light out of fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of not being accepted. So instead of shining, they shrink. They stay silent. They hold back. But Jesus makes it clear. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. That would defeat the purpose. And maybe the real question is this. Are you hiding who you're meant to be? Let's make this real. Being salt and light is not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. It's about how you speak, how you treat people, how you respond under pressure, how you live when no one is watching. It's choosing integrity over convenience, kindness over bitterness, truth over popularity. And here's the key. You don't have to change the whole world. Just don't let the world change you. Because influence doesn't start with crowds. It starts with moments, small decisions, daily choices, consistent actions. That's how light spreads. But then, Jesus shifts the conversation again. And this next part? It goes deeper than behavior, deeper than appearance, deeper than what people see on the outside. Because now, he addresses something most people try to avoid, the condition of the heart. Up until this point, many people believed righteousness was about following rules, external behavior, looking the part, doing the right things in public. But Jesus Christ challenges that completely. He begins to say, "You have heard it said," and then follows it with, "But I say to you." And in that moment, he raises the standard, not by adding more rules, but by going straight to the root, the heart, because it's possible to look good on the outside and still be broken on the inside. It's possible to avoid certain actions, but still carry the same attitudes within. And what Jesus is about to reveal will challenge not just what you do, but who you are becoming. Now this is where it gets uncomfortable, because up until now, you could listen and think, okay, I get it. Be humble, be kind, be different. But here, Jesus Christ removes every place we tend to hide, every excuse, every surface-level version of righteousness, and he begins to expose something deeper. Not your actions, but your heart. He says, "You have heard it said, do not murder." Most people listening would agree with that. I've never done that. I'm good. But then he says, "But I say to you, anyone who is angry with their brother is in danger of judgment." Wait, what? Anger. That feels extreme. But think about it. Where does murder begin? It doesn't start with an action. It starts with a seed. Resentment, bitterness, uncontrolled anger. Jesus is not exaggerating. He's exposing the root. Because if you deal with the root, you stop the fruit before it ever grows. And suddenly, this becomes personal. Because now it's not about extreme actions. It's about everyday emotions. That frustration you hold on to, that grudge you refuse to release, that silent resentment. It matters. So here's the question. Is there anger in your heart right now that you've justified? And then he takes it even further. He says, if you're about to offer something to God, and you remember someone has something against you, pause. Go and make it right first. Think about that. Before worship, before religious activity, before outward expression, he prioritizes relationships. Why? Because you can't truly be right with God while choosing to stay wrong with people. That's challenging, because reconciliation is hard. It requires humility. It requires honesty. It requires you to sometimes take the first step, even when you feel like you shouldn't have to. But this is the kind of life Jesus is calling you into, a life where peace is pursued, not avoided. Then he shifts again. You have heard it said, do not commit adultery. Again, many would think, okay, I'm fine. But then he says, but I say to you, anyone who looks with lust has already committed adultery in their heart. Now the focus moves even deeper, to thoughts, to intentions, to what happens in the private space no one else sees. Because here's the truth. You can control your actions in public and still let your thoughts run wild in private. But Jesus is showing something important. Transformation isn't real if it only exists on the outside. It has to reach your inner life, your thought patterns, your desires, your focus. And this isn't about shame. It's about freedom. Because what controls your thoughts eventually shapes your life. Then comes one of the hardest teachings of all. Love your enemies. Not tolerate. Not ignore. Love. Pray for those who hurt you. Do good to those who oppose you. This goes against every instinct, because naturally, we want justice. We want fairness. We want people to get what they deserve. But Jesus introduces a different way. Grace. And this is where everything shifts, because it's easy to love people who are good to you. Anyone can do that. But loving someone who hurt you, that requires transformation. That requires strength. That requires something deeper than emotion. And here's why it matters. Because when you live this way, you break cycles. Cycles of hate, cycles of revenge, cycles of division. You become different, not because it's easy, but because it's powerful. So now, step back and look at what's happening. This is not behavior modification. This is heart transformation. It's not about checking boxes. It's about becoming a different kind of person. A person who is honest about their emotions, intentional with their thoughts, quick to forgive, willing to love beyond comfort. And that kind of life, it stands out. But there's still one question left. How do you actually live this out? Consistently. How do you build a life that doesn't collapse under pressure? Because knowing truth is one thing, living it is another. And this is where Jesus Christ brings everything together, with a final illustration that makes it impossible to ignore. So now the question is, no longer, do you understand this message? The real question is, what are you going to do with it? Because everything Jesus Christ has said up to this point leads here, to a decision. In the middle of this sermon, Jesus teaches something deeply personal: how to connect with God, not through performance, not through empty repetition, but through relationship. He shows that prayer isn't about impressing people. It's about aligning your heart, trusting God daily, depending on Him, not just when things go wrong, but in every moment. And then he says something that cuts through distraction. Seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else will follow. Think about that. Most people spend their lives chasing things: success, money, recognition, security. But Jesus flips it. He says, put God first, align your life with His ways, and trust that what you need will come. Not always what you want, but what truly matters. So ask yourself, what's first in your life right now? Because whatever is first is shaping everything else. And then Jesus ends with a picture. Simple, clear, impossible to ignore. He says there are two kinds of people. Both hear His words. Both have access to the same truth. But their outcomes are completely different. One builds his house on the rock. The other builds on sand. At first, they might look the same. Both houses stand. Both appear strong. But then the storm comes. The wind rises. The rain falls. The pressure hits. And suddenly, the foundation is revealed. The house built on sand collapses. The one built on the rock stands. And here's the key. The difference is not what they heard. It's what they did. This is the moment everything comes together. Because listening to truth is not enough. Understanding truth is not enough. Even agreeing with it is not enough. Transformation happens when you apply it, when you live it, when it moves from information to action. So many people hear messages like this, feel inspired for a moment, and then go right back to the same patterns, the same mindset, the same habits, and nothing changes. Not because the truth wasn't powerful, but because it was never applied. So here's the challenge. Don't let this be another message you watch. And forget. Choose one thing. Just one. Maybe it's letting go of anger. Maybe it's forgiving someone. Maybe it's being bold about your faith. Maybe it's finally putting God first in your daily life. Whatever it is, start there. Because small steps, lead to real change. If this message challenged you, I want to hear from you. Which part spoke to you the most? Drop it in the comments. And if you know someone who needs this, share this with them. Because this message, this teaching from Jesus Christ, still changes lives today.